Hello everybody, welcome along. My name is Benjamin Bloom. This is the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel. Please leave your bias at the door and join us to discuss Isaiah Jones versus Died Spence, the battle of the right-sided players, both owned by Middlesbrough, but one loaned to Nottingham Forest, and both really playing stormingly well down the right-hand side of their respective teams in the Championship. We are here because we took a look at Alexander Mitrovic earlier in the week. Go and check out that video. And you can thank Max there and David, who suggested a comparison of these two players. If you've got any ideas for deep dives, tweet me at Benjamin Bloom. Or stick them in the comments of this one with your thoughts on the Died Spence, Isaiah Jones conversation. And while you're there, please hit like on the video. Now, I want this to be a fun, balanced conversation. There's no winner. There's no loser, so let's keep it calm in the comments. And I normally avoid who's the best in the division type conversations. They tend to be very hard to prove or disprove. But what we do have is a very interesting comparison between these two and a very interesting story as to how we get this battle of two players with the same parent club tearing it up for two different clubs. And how will it all end as well? Here is the tale. So we're going to look at last season first. And Isaiah Jones is not really in the picture last season. We'll come on to him in a second. Died Spence is. That is the Who Scored. And a lot of my data is going to be from Who Scored. So you can check that out over there at whoscored.com. That is their kind of picture of the Middlesbrough formation summary. Players with the highest appearance for each position. You can see Died Spence, although he's wearing number 2. I can see 2 number 2s there. I don't quite know how that works indeed. But Died Spence playing inside right in a 4-2-3-1. So basically a right winger, not the right wing back. We're going to be making a comparison of 2 right wing backs later on in this video. You can see down the right, his heat map skews into the opposition's half, which means he's more an attacking player, I guess, than a defensive player. 22 starts. Is he really pulling up any trees? 1 goal, 0 assists? Not really for a right winger. Do you want more of that? We'll do a more detailed comparison later with some more detailed numbers. So the state of play going into this season is that Died Spence is kind of working his way into the team. Young player, but not really pulling up any trees, I think it would be fair to say. In the background, you can see the lovely old Neil Warnock there, who needs some credit here, him and his staff, whoever was making this decision, to get Isaiah Jones, a 21-year-old winger, then to put pen to paper on a deal which ties into Boro until 2022 at the earliest. Not entirely sure why that's worded like that. We assume this contract, which has since been extended, was going to the end of this season coming. And of course, Middlesbrough have acted very quickly to extend that, understandably. So we go into this season with Spence further along than Jones, it's fair to say, but both players in the picture. But are you telling me at the start of this season we're seeing 2 Championship stars? No, we didn't know that then, did we? And to be fair, I hadn't heard of Isaiah Jones when we went into this first game between Fulham and Middlesbrough. And if you really, really want, you can check back. I did a watch along. So literally my first ever viewing of Isaiah Jones is immortalised here on YouTube. And I think I remember being fairly impressed with him. I'm sure someone will pull out some quotes to the contrary, won't they? But there we go. This feels like a bit of a sliding doors moment, this game, doesn't it? In terms of one player's going to work their way into the team and one player's going to end up going out on loan. Don't want to say getting bombed out, but you know what Neil Warnock's like. He's a gambler, isn't he? And he's very happy to shift out players to bring others in and just go for it, especially at his age, but he's done it all the way through his career. So have a look down there on the right-hand side. You can see both Died Spence and Isaiah Jones come into this game. Spence at 55 minutes, Jones at 71 minutes. And it's Mark Boller who's going to get the winning goal from an Isaiah Jones assist. Now, forgive me, I'm trying to recall the game, but I think Jones might have come on down the left-hand side. And this is going to be a feature of this story. It takes a while to get to 2 right wing-backs duking it out. But I can't help having the feel here, and Middlesbrough fans will know much more about this than me, I can't help having the feel of the sliding doors moment, that this is the point where Isaiah Jones went to Neil Warnock, I'm your guy, And if I don't know whether it was a zero-sum game and a binary choice, one or the other, and maybe Jed Spence is slightly pushed to one side. You can elucidate more in the comments if you've got a feeling on that. Right, this is Warnock's experimentation. So that is rounds 2, 3, 4 and 5 in the Championship. Slightly annoyingly, SofaScore that I'm using for this presents the away games in a different direction. But what you can see is round 2, Spence and Jones actually playing together. Spence down the right and Jones down the left. Think what could have been. There you go. You get it again, maybe in a slightly different situation. Although, look, they're both playing arguably the same position. Maybe there's a number 10 in there in Matt Crooks. But we're focusing on these two players. So they both started those couple of games. Then that away game at Middlesbrough, you can see now Spence is out and Jones is starting down the left wing. In that game at Derby. And then in round 5, he's going to play left wing back. So what we see over the course of the first 5 games of this season is they both start on the bench. They both come on in the first game. They both start the next couple of games together on the wings. Then Spence is out of the team and Jones gets his first go at wing back, albeit left wing back. So it feels like throughout August, Jed Spence, Isaiah Jones, Neil Warnock, it's all this big experiment and ultimately it's Jones in, Spence out. Okay? Where is Spence going? He's going off to Nottingham Forest on Wednesday, 1st of September. Is it a season-long loan? Yes. There was lots of talk and we'll get to that in January. There's normally a break clause in this and you know my position if you watch the channel on these things. Show me the contract and we can have a conversation. If not, most of it's just a guessing game in terms of what's written. But normally there's an opportunity for... It makes sense. Anyone who's rented a house will know. Stick that 6-month break clause in there in case you feel differently than you do. What's important is it's September the 1st. And on September the 1st, Neil Warnock manages Middlesbrough and Chris Hughton manages Nottingham Forest, who... embarrassingly, in terms of Forest, considering how many players have come in and gone out there, didn't really have any fullbacks, so to speak of. And Hughton ends up loaning in Max Lowe from Sheffield United, former Derby guy, and Jed Spence. So he needed some fullbacks, and he immediately popped Spence in at right back. Okay, but Steve Cooper is hired as Nottingham Forest coach. Literally 3 weeks later, I've popped up Cooper's first game there, and Jed Spence is playing at right wing back. We know, if we watch the Championship, Steve Cooper loves a 3 at the back. He loves a wing back system. Connor Roberts and Jake Bidwell did a great job for Cooper for Swansea in previous iterations of his 3-5-2. I've put Cooper's first game up there. Again, unless you can show me definitive proof to the contrary, I believe that is the first team Steve Cooper selected. I know a lot of Nottingham Forest fans have kind of posited the theory that, well, Stephen Reid was caretaker for the game at the weekend before Cooper is announced on the Monday, and they play that same system. There's thoughts that Steve Cooper may have had some say in that. But look, however you view it, Spence goes into Forest, Hughton goes out, Cooper comes in, Jed Spence is now going to be their right wing back going forward. Meanwhile, at Middlesbrough, and you can see I've circled down there 2 important dates, Neil Warnock is going out. But take a look over at the left-hand side. On the 2nd of November, before, I think his last game is at West Brom, isn't it? So this is maybe his second last game pass at Luton. Neil Warnock does play Isaiah Jones at right wing back for the first time there. But Neil Warnock is not going to be hanging around because I think Steve Gibson sees an open door possibly this season. And we saw him do this with Gary Monk and Tony Pulis. So I think when he gets an idea in his head, he's quite quick to go for it. And Chris Wilder is available, interested, and he's back into the Championship. And Neil Warnock is out the door, having loaned Jed Spence out, overseen the signing of the contract, overseen his development into the first team, left wing, right wing, left wing back, right wing back now. So at the point Chris Wilder goes in, and Chris Wilder's smart, he does what a lot of managers do. He kind of looks, right, what's the team doing at the moment? I will go with that for match 1 or 2 perhaps, and then I'll start to tweak. So we get an evolution rather than a revolution, to use a Tony Hare's Alan Partridge meeting term there for anyone who's familiar with that particular series. Okay, so we've now got Wilder in at Middlesbrough. We've got Jones at right wing back, and we've got Spence at right wing back. I think we can let the games begin now, because these two players are now going to become kind of stars in their position in both of their teams. There is the discussion about the break clause here. That's on the 7th of January, you can see, from the local paper up in Middlesbrough. I'll read the quotes in a second. What we need to say, though, is Died Spence now has a standout performance, doesn't he? It must be, I think if it's after that headline, I apologise, but it'll be either days before or days after. In the FA Cup, on the TV, Died Spence is brilliant for Nottingham Forest against Arsenal. And Isaiah Jones is very much catching the eye and starting to rack up some good numbers for Middlesbrough. So the question is, do Middlesbrough, do they bring him back in January to, maybe utilise in their team? Do they bring him back to sell him, cash in? He's playing well for Nottingham Forest. Could they maybe sell him to Nottingham Forest? Or even higher up, we think after that Arsenal game for Died Spence, lots of big clubs were perhaps looking at him. Arsenal and Spurs, I think, were linked, and some European clubs as well. So there we go. Chris Wilder said, I think the biggest thing is the young man that's playing in the position at the moment, Isaiah Jones. I don't want to stunt his progression because he's outstanding. Bringing a player back who has played football and wants to play first team football, as they all do, I've got to weigh up a lot of things. Jed wanted to stay at Nottingham Forest, so I think I've got to think about the chemistry and the harmony of the changing room here as well. Do I want an unhappy player here? And he would be. He's made it perfectly clear to me that he wants to stay there. I hope I'm not chucking him under the bus. I understand his position. It's going well for him and he wants to continue that. Wilder's so clever, isn't he? I hope I'm not chucking him under the bus. Maybe without meaning to. He did a little bit in respect to the fact that Wilder has obviously gone. Jones is our guy. Spence, if he doesn't particularly want to be and he wants to continue at Forest, I'm going to publicly say that as well, so people know exactly what I'm doing. And then, of course, all the Middlesbrough fans will back Chris Wilder over this. We'll talk about what next at the end of the video, but yeah, we'll have a look at the end of the season in terms of how that works out. If Died Spence has been publicly said to have wanted to stay at Nottingham Forest. In defence of Died Spence, he's got a deal on loan for the season, which he's agreed to and Middlesbrough have agreed to. So I suppose it's kind of Middlesbrough's prerogative. The status quo is he just stays at Nottingham Forest. So in defence of Died Spence, he signed the thing for a season, and it would be up to Middlesbrough if they wanted to break that. So I suppose he's somewhat a passenger there, but I'd be interested in people's thoughts on particularly how that was worded. Right. So we've reached February now, and we will start to do some comparison. Don't worry, I'll go back to that slide, where we now have, and I suppose you can argue Died Spence had a month or two head start on the right wing-back position, but they've both been fantastic, haven't they? And Spence as well, in another TV game, he loves the FA Cup, doesn't he? He was fantastic against Leicester, wasn't he? And I think there was a goal he scored and a great performance away at Birmingham for Forest as well. Isaiah Jones very recently has torn Derby a new one, frankly, in that grudge match, that 4-1 win. And I do remember as well that late win for Middlesbrough at Blackpool was all coming down Jones's side, those two late goals. And was it two late goals in that game? No. Blackpool equalised and then Jones did the business down the right-hand side. Forgive me if I fall over the two players who play in the same position for the same club with one-syllable names. Anyway, let's do the comparison here. So some general numbers before we get into the details. So Jones is 22 and Spence is 21. Both born in London. Jones did sign that extra 3 years, essentially, on the contract there. So Middlesbrough are in a good position. They've got Spence contracted for another 2 seasons past this one, and they've got Jones for another 3 seasons past this one. In terms of experience, Spence has more of it. He's played nearly 6,000 minutes in the Championship, and Jones has played 2,100. So just one match more than 2,000 minutes, essentially, and a little bit there. So interesting, slight disparity there in terms of Spence being younger and having quite a bit more on-pitch experience. But hey, it's what they're going to do in the future. And there's a big number here to look at. Goals, okay. Spence 3 and Jones 1. And that's obviously parlaying in Spence played a fair amount down the right wing as well. The real big number is 8 assists for Isaiah Jones. They've all come this season. 1 for Died Spence. So we think they're both very good players, but that's a big stat. That's a big wave of flag. 8 assists from a player. And will he get double figures this season? Probably. The rate he's going to probably get them very, very soon. Now, let's look specifically at this season. And we got some defensive numbers here. So, look, this is where we're going to make a direct comparison of 2 players, acknowledging that football is a team sport, okay? And Steve Cooper and Chris Wilder are different managers, of course. Apples, oranges, I'm not saying one's better than the other. Chris Wilder has a promotion on his CV with Sheffield United, 2 in fact, if you count the League One. But we're talking about the Championship, aren't we? Steve Cooper has 2 consecutive playoff finishes, and were it not for that pesky Brentford, who were a bit of an outlier for a non-parachute team, weren't they? Maybe he would have a promotion on his CV as well. He doesn't. And I think there's a little argument, even though Middlesbrough got good defensive numbers this season, I think most people would argue Chris Wilder is probably a slightly more attacking manager. I think we've heard about overlapping centre-backs to death, really. I think we can move on from that from about 2017, to be honest, when I first laid eyes on it. But Steve Cooper, very solid with team shape. But I'll say it again, Connor Roberts and Jake Bidwell were contributing players in an attacking sense at Swansea. So it's not like he's sticking 3 centre-backs and 2 wing-backs and they're just defending and pinging the ball forward to the forwards. Not like that at all. Let's look at the defensive numbers then. So Isaiah Jones, these are per game numbers, is higher on tackles there, 2 tackles to 1.5. Died Spence is higher on interceptions. Again, can you put that down to the way the teams play? Possibly you can. You'd expect Spence to be behind the ball a bit more often than Jones. Clearances, Spence by 0.1 per game. Blocks, neither player is making particularly many. Aerials, Spence makes double the amount, but is that really either player's job from a defensive sense? Yes, you want a wing back to maybe get across when the ball's on the other side and do some defending. Who knows? Dribbled past, it's a complete tie on that one, and it's once every 2 games if you look at 0.5. So there's not much in it in terms of defensive numbers, and you would have to say both of these players are playing in sides that defend pretty well at Championship level. Here are the passing numbers, and I suppose there's another conversation to have. Where do you look for a wing-back? Modern wing-back, even full-back, look at the elite ones in the Premier League. They do a lot of attacking, plus they're expected to defend as well. Okay? So how you perceive the numbers, as I always say, is up to you. I'll just present them. So key passes, 1.3 for Isaiah Jones to Spence. So that's passes that result in a shot by a teammate. That's very good, 1.3, isn't it? And to be honest, Spence's number is decent as well. Average number of passes per game, that's very interesting because we know Isaiah Jones' output is very good and he does it from a lot less passes, 21.5. Spence 39.8. Again, apples to oranges. I'd be interested to know where Spence is completing those passes. I suspect Jones has got a bit more responsibility to progress that ball further down the pitch, whereas Spence may be building up the play in his own half. I don't know. If you want to dig deeper, go for it and let me know in the comments. Pass completion, though, nothing in it. Look, 74.3 Jones, 75.5 Spence. Crosses, nothing in it. 0.4 and 0.5. Long balls, again, and this is not a stick to beat Steve Cooper with, it's Spence 1.7 to 0.6 for Jones, so it's nearly a multiple of 3 greater. And for some people, they see the word long ball and they think it's dirty. It's clearly not. you know, one man's long ball is another man's clearance, is another man's cultured pass, isn't it? But certainly, we know Chris Wilder, if we take the Sheffield United body of work, with the wing back, it's all about them. They never cross the ball, did they? I know crosses and long balls are different, but Wilder was very much about, right, he's going to get the wing back on the ball. Centre midfielder, striker are coming across. Centre back was going to overlap. Short passes, can he go out there and then come back in? And it was very much, I would watch Sheffield United and I'd think, get it in the box. 2 passes later, I'd think, no, that was smart that they didn't. So, look, again, think about the manager rather than the player, or as well as the player. Here are the attacking numbers, and we would, looking at Isaiah Jones' assist numbers, expect him to be a bit of a kingpin on this one. But, you tell me, 1 goal apiece, 8 assists to 1. We've said, look, if there's one huge number to go wow at, it is Jones's assist numbers, isn't it? Fantastic. Shots per game, though, 0.7 each, fine. And there's a really interesting one. Dribbles per game, Spence is actually 1.6 per game to Jones 1.5. Where they occur on the pitch is a different matter. Fouled, there you go. Maybe that's why the dribble number is low. I don't know. 2.1 for Jones, Spence 1.5. And I've put the who scored ratings at the bottom there. 7 for Jones, 6.95. My advice is, if you are an emotional football fan, never even go on the internet, let alone look at who scored. Who scored obviously have a very technical algorithm with every bit of data analysed. Yet a football fan who sits in the stand gets very emotional that their favourite player didn't get an 8 and they've got a 7 or something. So look, take it for what it is, and if you've got a problem with it, send a strongly worded letter to who scored. I just thought it'd be interesting to show they're kind of 0.5 apart. What we're finding with these two players is they're very, very evenly matched, aren't they? There's just not a hell of a lot in it, which can only bode well for Middlesbrough, can't it? So, what next is the question. Having concluded, and look, let me give you my opinion, and you can give me yours for what it's worth. And an opinion is an opinion. Everybody's got one. You can give yours in the comments rather than getting emotional about mine. So, looking at the two players, you can't ignore that assist number. And just watching footage as well of that end product in the penalty box, the ability to do the little bit of magic and create a goal, which is worth a fortune in football, isn't it? Maybe I'd give Isaiah Jones the edge on that regard. As a all-round player, up and down the side, there's not much in it at all, is there? Some of the numbers have Spence a little bit higher. Defensively, I don't know. And then you have to parlay into the conversation the fact it's two different teams, it's two different managers, the players are following two different sets of instructions. I think what we do know is they're both very, very good, aren't they? I hate these conversations of who's the best in the division. It gets very tribal and very partisan very quickly, because 9 times out of 10, I hate to say it, it's the supporter of a team who's watched a player in their team play well, and they come and tell me so-and-so's the best left-back in the division. And what they're doing is they're not actually doing an analysis of all the left-backs in the division. They're using exaggeration for effect in order to persuade me that so-and-so is a good player. Now, you don't need to persuade me that Died Spence and Isaiah Jones are good players. They clearly both are. And we're in the realms of subjectivity as to who's better or who's worse. Spence, as we've said, has got more experience at a slightly younger age. Jones, though, has he got that magic that takes you right to the top in terms of, can you beat a man in the penalty box and play the killer pass to get those assists? I don't know. Horses for courses and subjectivity, of course. What happens next will be very, very interesting, because Middlesbrough own the registration for both players. Both sides here are in a promotion battle, aren't they? And could we get the wondrous situation that they actually meet in the playoffs? I can't remember off the top of my head. Someone will elucidate in the comments and smarten me up. 2 playoff opponents where one team can block another team's player because he's on loan from them. I don't remember that. I'm sure it's probably happened and I'm just not recalling particularly. Look, the ideal scenario, almost for both clubs, is that Middlesbrough get promoted, isn't it? In terms of Nottingham Forest, because let's be fair, the value of both players is increasing. Let's play out the scenario that Middlesbrough get promoted, in which case there may be a chance that they would sell Spence at the end of the season, in that they've got the position filled. Chris Wilder has had this quote of he wanted to stay at Nottingham Forest. The problem is, for Nottingham Forest particularly, the better Spence plays during this season, especially if he keeps tearing it up in the FA Cup live on TV in front of the nation, that he'll become out of their price range. That maybe a parachute team then, which Nottingham Forest aren't, will be the ones that Middlesbrough sell to, or even higher ceiling, would a Premier League team take him? Then you do have that question, if Middlesbrough were to get promoted, well, give him a go? I don't know. They've already got a player in that position. Can they afford to carry two players in that same position? Maybe they can, if 100 million quid TV money's coming in. So I suspect if Middlesbrough were to get promoted, you would see Died Spence get sold. Probably to a parachute team, but maybe, if he's brilliant, really good for the rest of the season, maybe even higher than that. What if Middlesbrough don't get promoted? Let's assume Middlesbrough don't get promoted and Nottingham Forest don't get promoted. What happens then? One of these players is going to have to leave Middlesbrough, because clubs challenging at the top of the league that don't get promoted, that don't have parachute payments, even clubs that do have parachute payments, you've got to sell. You've got to sell and keep that turnover and that money coming in, haven't you? So who knows what would happen? Would it be Isaiah Jones that got sold if maybe they weren't in the box seat in that negotiation and Died Spence has to come back in? I don't know. Is Died Spence completely done at Middlesbrough and they would try and move him on and keep Jones? What happens if Middlesbrough don't go up and Nottingham Forest do? Then all of a sudden, you would think, unless it was a situation where it was the two meeting in the playoff semi-finals and Spence played right the way through, that the first order of business with their 100 million quid TV money would be to sign Died Spence from Middlesbrough. Look, it's a fascinating tale between the two, isn't it? Isaiah Jones versus Died Spence. As I say, surely it can only be good for Middlesbrough. And in conclusion, they're both really, really good players. They're both young, and I'm sure there'll be some England under-21 links and links with big clubs. So I think it's good for the players. It's good for the division to have them both in. It's obviously very good for Middlesbrough. I do understand the position of some Boro fans around November, where they're saying, why we loaned this player to this club and he's doing really well, and all of a sudden they're getting closer and closer in the table. So I get it. It's a fascinating situation, isn't it? And I would be very receptive to receiving your comments on how you think it's going to play out. Let's not make it a huge bang crash wallop binary. Oh, this one all day long. This one's... How can you say this one? And all that nonsense. Let's try and have a sensible discussion about each player, and particularly the situation as it pertains to Middlesbrough, Nottingham Forest, Isaiah Jones, Died Spence, and the role of Neil Warnock, Chris Hughton, Chris Wilder, and Steve Cooper at the moment. There we go. That is our deep dive on Isaiah Jones versus Died Spence. Get your thoughts in via the comments. Check out the previous deep dive we did on Alexander Mitrovic. Is he really a Premier League flop? Really? Have you looked at the numbers? Go and check that one out as well. And as I suggested, either tweet me at Benjamin Bloom or comment on this video what other deep dive videos you'd like to see, particularly if you enjoyed this one. And please hit thumbs up on the video. If you enjoyed this video, the more people that hit thumbs up, the more maybe Forest fans or Middlesbrough fans, it might go into their feed as something they might want to watch, and we might get some more subscribers over here at the channel, where we are so busy with championship stuff. So well worth hitting that subscribe button, regardless of whether you enjoyed this video or not. I'm not sure you got to the end if you didn't enjoy it, but there we go. Especially given I'm nearly 30 minutes in, I should really wrap this up. But championship every weekend, Saturday Super Stream covering all of that. Previews, reviews, news, loads and loads of stuff. Hit the subscribe button, but more importantly, get your comments in on Died Spence and Isaiah Jones. Thank you for watching.